In every corner of the world, from the wealthiest nations to the smallest islands, one truth echoes across borders. Every country is drowning in debt. The United States carries more than $38 trillion, the largest burden in its history. Europe holds $14 trillion, Japan, nearly $9 trillion. Even countries dripping with natural riches, Saudi Arabia with its oil, Germany and China with their factories, are shackled to enormous obligations. But here's the twist. If everyone owes money, who is everyone indebted to? Welcome to Cash Repux, where money collides with power and history reveals the secrets hidden beneath the numbers. Because in this world nothing is ever as clean or simple as it appears. Debt is not just a burden, it is the invisible skeleton that holds up our modern civilization. Every war fought, every crisis endured, every rise and collapse of an empire rests on this unseen architecture of credit and promises. And when you follow this chain of creditors long enough, a startling revelation emerges. Humanity doesn't owe money to one single power, it owes money to itself. But the weight of that burden is not shared equally. To understand how we arrived at a planet carrying over $315 trillion in debt, 3 times more than all economic production on Earth, we must journey back in time. Back to the origin of national debt itself, a concept born not in banks or trading floors but in the smoke and chaos of war. Centuries ago, England was locked in conflict with France. The treasury was empty. Gold reserves were fading. The crown was desperate. So the king turned to wealthy merchants and offered them a radical bargain. Fund my war today, and I will reward you with perpetual interest, paid by the taxes of tomorrow. In that moment, something extraordinary was born. The Bank of England. And with it, the very first national debt. For the first time in history, a government gained the power to spend money it did not yet possess. Lenders received a priceless token in return, a promise carved into the future, a government bond. France copied the idea. The Dutch perfected it. The United States used it to finance its revolution and rebuild a nation. Debt became the lifeblood of empire, a new currency of power. Kingdoms once fought to seize gold. Now they fought to secure trust, the belief that their promises would be repaid. The battlefield shifted from fields of cannon smoke to balance sheets and ledgers. 3 centuries later, debt had become the great engine of the global economy. The United States now adds $1 trillion of debt roughly every 100 days. Japan's debt reaches 250% of its GDP. Developing nations borrow to survive. Rich nations borrow to maintain influence. Every country owes, every bank lends, and every citizen through taxes, pensions, and savings is both debtor and creditor at the same time. But who exactly holds the other end of the rope? The answer leads to the heart of the modern financial system, the United States. Of America's $38 trillion burden, about half is owed to the public. 2/3 of that is held by Americans' banks, mutual funds, insurance companies, pension funds, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining portion, around $9 trillion, is owned by foreign nations: Japan, China, the UK, Luxembourg, Belgium. So the famous line "America owes China" is true, but only for around 2% of America's total debt. Most of the debt the United States carries is owed to itself. A loop of promises. The government issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve creates new money to support them. Taxpayers pay interest that cycles back into American investments. It is like staring into a financial mirror, seeing the same system reflected from every angle. This circular structure isn't just American, it is global. Japan lends to the US lends to Europe. Europe lends to developing nations. Developing nations lend right back by storing reserves in Western bonds. A worldwide chain of IOSH promise backed by another promise. Backed by another promise creates a global game of hot potato where the potato never hits the ground. Towering above this chain stands an even more powerful force: the markets. Hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, pension giants, and central banks manage tens of trillions. They decide which countries can borrow cheaply, which must pay dearly, and which ones will collapse under the weight of doubt. When confidence breaks, nations crumble. Greece in 2010, Argentina, Sri Lanka, currencies implode. Governments fall, people riot. In those moments, the invisible creditors suddenly become terrifyingly visible. At the core of this world lie the central banks, the high priests of modern finance. They do not simply monitor debt, they manufacture it. When the Federal Reserve buys a bond, it creates new money. One balance sheet grows, another contracts. Every dollar in your wallet is tied to a debt somewhere else. Money is no longer gold or metal or even paper. It is debt wearing the mask of currency. And this system moves not on repayment, but on confidence. Governments do not plan to pay off their debts, not now, not ever. They refinance them endlessly, rolling old promises into new ones, paying interest like a subscription fee. Debt has become the oxygen of the global economy. If it stopped, everything would suffocate. If the United States truly paid off its debt, banks would lose their safest asset, markets would collapse, the dollar supply would shrink, the financial system would implode. The world requires government debt the way a heart requires a pulse. So when politicians promise to balance the budget or eliminate the debt, what they're offering isn't a plan, it's a fantasy. The real objective is not repayment, it is perpetual trust. As long as investors believe, the system endures. The numbers can stretch into the sky. But trust is not equal, and neither is the burden. When we say we owe it to ourselves, we forget that the money flows upward from taxpayers and workers to banks and funds. Debt is not only a transfer between nations, it is a transfer between classes. The wealthy own the debt, everyone else services it. Inequality rises, debt rises, and the machine continues, until one day the engine runs out of fuel. When new borrowing can no longer sustain old promises, confidence cracks, and the illusion vanishes. We are reminded of what debt has always been, a promise stretching endlessly into the future until the future stops believing. If this gave you a new way to see the world, hit subscribe. History holds the answers, and together we'll uncover them.